about Indian culture. And what had happened was that the night before, this devotee, Hari Sauri, does anybody here know him? He was British, but he was living in New Mayapur at that time. He was a gardener. So he came into Prabhupada's room maybe about 9 o'clock at night, and he just picked this whole big basket full of all the different kinds of vegetables that they were growing. Everything, potatoes and tomatoes and okra and peas and spinach and lots of things. So Prabhupada picked out the peas, and he asked his cook, make me some samosas from this peas. So he liked it very much. So then the next night then, Harikesh brought in a salad that he had made from last night's garden produce for Prabhupada to snack on. Bhagavan asked Prabhupada if the peas that he had had last night were good. Prabhupada laughed, very good, but I could not digest them. That is my fault, but it was so nice and palatable. Once more he glorified the simple, self-sufficient life, criticizing the artificial, time and money-wasting scientific civilization. So give this fresh fruit. So don't buy all rotten. In the market, you cannot get fresh, all 300 years old. Anything fresh, that is full of vitamin. So you grow fresh and you take fresh. In India, there's no such system to purchase 300 years old bread and eat. It must be freshly made. So the wife is preparing in the simple oven, the husband is eating, the children are eating. So Yashoda Mai, she was calling Krsna, come on back, your father is waiting. So you remember this? So that is the Indian system. The father and the children, they sit down, the mother will bring fresh dal, rice, chapati, and distribute, and they will eat. So we used to do that. Along with father, we shall sit down for eating separately. So there was no need of a table, on the ground. And mother will distribute, cook. No servant, but the mother personally, the wife personally is doing. So in the Krishna book, Bhagavan recollected, in the Krishna book you described that in Krishna's palace there were so many beautiful maidservants, but Rukmini chose to fan Krishna personally. Yes, Prabhupada said, still in India, family system, when the husband comes home from the office, the wife takes care immediately, even in these days. So that is at least a manifestation of faithfulness. Pointing to the tomatoes on his plate, he recalled their introduction into Indian agriculture. In our childhood, these tomatoes, they were called foreign eggplant. And because it was foreign, nobody would touch it. In our childhood, we would never eat the tomato. It was rejected by the whole Indian Hindu culture. Because nowadays you can't get any preparation without tomato. But because it was imported, they would not touch it. The milk cloth, because they were imported, no gentleman would touch. No religious function would allow the use of mill-made cloth. They wore only khadi. And so far medicine is concerned, they would never touch it. Allopathic medicine. Prabhupada actually told me another time, he said this allopathic medicine, because the British came in and they started all these educational institutions, and gradually it became advertised that without a British education you weren't actually educated. That propaganda they were very expert at doing. So in their schools then they saw now there's all this Ayurvedic medicine, this is all some village, hocus pocus. So we have our allopathic medicine. So they began introducing allopathic system. So all the young men at schools, all the educated young men, so then they were trained in this allopathic system, but they were not allowed to learn the other systems. So when they came out from school, they only knew allopathic medicine. So some doctors that Prabhupada knew, they told him that, when they had to then start their practices, people actually, they were happy with the Ayurvedic system. So they would come and then they would try to treat them, and then the people would refuse to take their allopathic medicine because they were, suspicious of it. So he said we had to bow down and touch their feet and beg them, please take this medicine, because that was all they knew, and they would be out of a job if they couldn't persuade the patients. Because that's a lot different now, but that was how it was, when it was first introduced. Okay, so looking after people means feeding them. And if you don't want to look after somebody, so that Prabhupada mentioned that. This was on August the 17th in 1976 in Hyderabad. So we had arrived there, and then, because the temple wasn't finished, Mahamsa took us out to this man, Mr. Hari Badruka's place, to spend the night. So when we got out there, it was a long way away from the temple, and then Prabhupada, the next morning he said, this is not suitable, we can't stay so far away from the temple when the opening is just 2 days away. And Mahamsa had said, but Prabhupada, the rooms are not ready. Prabhupada said, it doesn't matter, we're ready or not, we're coming. So we packed up and we left right after bathing in the morning. We arrived at the temple at daybreak, and it gave us a chance to see the place clearly. The temple is impressive. The land was donated by Mr. G. Pullareddy, who I was just told just died about a couple of weeks ago. And although it is only 950 square yards, the building covers 90% of it. Its location is excellent in the central part of the city, and it's hardly 10 minutes walk from the main railway station. Prabhupada's quarters are on the first floor at the back of the building. Despite the fact that work is still going on, and that cement, dirt and dust are everywhere, and the noise of the construction is all pervasive, Prabhupada moved right in. The room was so dirty, I had to sweep it out while Srila Prabhupada sat and watched. They couldn't even get it together to get a devotee in there to clean the room, ready for Prabhupada coming in. Somehow the local devotees couldn't arrange to have it cleaned before he came, but Prabhupada didn't seem to mind. His main concern is that they organise a successful opening of the temple. Settling into his 16 by 12 foot room, he smiled and he told us, "It's better to stay in one's own place than somebody else's. In India, even a poor man, he may be forced to eat somewhere else, but he must have his own place to stay. Otherwise, all respect is lost. He can eat at some other place every day, but he'll return to his own place for resting." He said the Indian system is so nice that even one's enemy may be treated as a guest and given everything. And then he added with a smile, although to get rid of an unwanted guest, one simply doesn't feed them. He explained that one does not eat or stay at another's place more than 3 days in a row, otherwise one becomes an unwanted guest. Actually, he said, one loses one's status as a guest and becomes a resident. It's interesting that Prabhupada, when he set up his life membership scheme, one of the attractions, one of the benefits of becoming a life member was that you got 3 days free stay in any ISKCON temple. So that's from that system. Spend 3 days, you're a guest. More than that, your status changes. So Prabhupada used to say, give them 3 free days. If they want to stay any longer than that, then they have to pay. That was a good... Okay, so it's 8:30. I think that we should finish at that point. So that's it. Does anybody have any questions or comments? The ladies never ask any questions. Why is that? Still mute. Yes.
I've heard from the devotees that Prasadam should be honored in right consciousness.
It should be honored
in right consciousness.
In the right consciousness.
Or else it doesn't have any effect.
Or it doesn't have any effect.
If it's not honored in a right consciousness.
Who said that? I never heard that.
I think it's misheard.
Prasadam is always effective. It's spiritual. Even if you don't know what it is, it doesn't matter. You give somebody prasadam, it immediately has a spiritual effect. That was Prabhupada's whole program. Yeah? Chant, eat, go home. No talk. Right. No talk. So where is his consciousness? He doesn't know what prasadam is. But he's eating, but Prabhupada said, Chaito Darpana Marjana, then you become purified. Where did you get that from?
I've heard devotees say that sometimes.
I never heard that one before. I don't think that's correct. As far as I know, prasadam is always purifying. Doesn't matter what your consciousness is. If you had to be in good consciousness before you took prasadam for it to be effective, what would be the point in distributing it? Nobody's in good consciousness. Yeah? Everybody's, you know, in Rajagun and Tamagun. I don't know. Anyway, whoever told you that, tell them this is bogus. Any other questions? Yes?
We hear many times that Prabhupada said that to eat science direct.
Yeah.
Also we read in the Upadeshamrita is very strict. He said still if even in his prasada we don't have to take sontus prasada.
Yes. Good question. Yeah. Prabhupada is saying eats up to the neck, and at the same time we read in the Upadeshamrita that to eat sumptuously is very bad for your spiritual life. That's exactly the question that I asked Prabhupada in 1974 when he came to Melbourne. Let me just see if I can find it here. It's actually part of this seminar, but we haven't got the time to get to it, but let's see if we can find it. Because I have a whole section on restaurants and stuff here as well. Okay, sorry, 1975, May the 23rd. We were out in the morning walk. This was before I became Prabhupada's servant. And Prabhupada had been speaking about controlling the tongue, right? Ajahara Prayashascha. You know, Vajjavegam, Manasakrodavegam, you have to control the tongue. So I asked Prabhupada, I said that you were speaking before about controlling the tongue, that it's very important. And in your lectures you have said that simply by eating prasadam, that is controlling the tongue. But still we have the tendency, when there's a big feast, to eat very much prasadam. So is that a good thing or not? So Prabhupada chuckled. He said, it is not very good, but still it is good. Instead of going to the restaurant and eating like the hogs and dogs, better to take prasadam. There is no harm. Krishna Bodha Dayamoy, Kodibhara Jiva Joy. Krishna is so kind. Just to conquer over your tongue, he has given us this nice variety of prasadam. So you take it and control your tongue. So it's not good, but I mean, it's not very good, but it's still good. You know, even if you overheat, but if it's prasadam, then no harm is done. Yeah, of course, eventually you have to get to the point where you eat, you know, in a controlled fashion. But, all right?
Better is to try to control.
Your tongue is being controlled if you simply take Krishna prasadam, right? Because the real control is to do it, you know, everything has to be spiritual. So if you only eat Krishna prasadam, all right, you may overeat Krishna prasadam, but it's controlled because you're only eating Krishna prasadam and nothing else. As he said, it's better than going to a restaurant and eating like a dog or a cat. Yeah. Now, later on, as you become more advanced, then you may, you know, decide not to eat so much prasadam. But still, you know, prasadam is the point of control. That's the whole thing. All right? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you already had one.
I mentioned anything ever about distributing prasadam on the streets with the Sankirtan devotees?
Well, many times. Prasadam distribution was always, you know, recommended. You know, of course, especially when you have big festivals like Rath Yatra. You know, that was always the system to give out lots and lots of prasadam from the Rath carts. Yeah. So yeah, Prabhupada recommended it. He liked that. Or going out on the street with little packets of prasadam and, you know, giving it, you know, with some advertisement for the Sunday feast or whatever. That was nice. What about when you're on book distribution? Well, I don't know. Ask your temple president. He'll tell me.
I used to do that, but actually every day. We had little packets of nuts and fruit.
Yes, it's nice. That's how you make friends with people, right? You know, even if they don't buy a book, then give them a little packet of, you know, burfi or sandash or something.
As long as you don't eat it yourself.
As long as you don't eat it yourself, you know. Yeah, so it's nice.
We used to find that actually send the devotees out with so many packs, and a few of them were consumed by the devotees. Some went pretty hungry.
Any other questions? Last one.
I mean, the highest standards are not to eat too much or not to eat too little, which, like it says in Bhagavad Gita. Is that true?
This is the standard, to not eat too much and not eat too little, as it says in Bhagavad Gita. Yeah. You know, as Prabhupada said, if you're a devotee, then you can eat as much as you like. But I am not a devotee. Now, if Prabhupada's saying I am not a devotee, then where does that leave the rest of us? Yeah. So he said, for those who are not devotees, they have to fast. In other words, yeah, you know, we have to exercise a little control. But still, even if you have no control, at least you have this much control, that you only eat prasadam and nothing else. Then you'll be okay. Alright? Like Raghunath Das Goswami, who was it I was speaking to this morning?
You spoke it in
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Alright. Yeah, how he was doing. Initially, when he left home, because he was a rich man's son, so, you know, he was living there in Jagannath Puri. Naturally, his parents were thinking, you know, he's starving there, and, you know, all these fanatic devotees and like this. So send him some money at least, because they have their attachment. So he was receiving that money, but then he was using it for the devotees. He wasn't spending it on himself. He was having big feasts. So he would buy, you know, all the Jagannath Prasadam and then distribute it. But later on, as he became a bit more advanced, he became embarrassed about taking that money. And then he cut it off, he stopped it. Then he ended up on the street just begging. Then he ended up going and just taking all the rotten. So Lord Chaitanya, he was happy at every stage. He was happy when he was using the money to distribute prasadam. He was more happy when he was begging on the street. And he was even more happy when he even stopped begging and was just taking all the rotten foodstuffs. So, you know, perfect, more perfect, and most perfect. That's the spiritual platform. Yes.
Did Srila Prabhupada ever give like a standard that a person had to be at before what they cooked could be considered prasad? Because sometimes you may go to people's homes or to an outside program or to a Hindu temple or whatever, and everybody comes and offers you prasad.
Yes. It is a little difficult. There was actually a conversation that we had in Nellore, I think about January the 4th in 1976, where Tamal Krishna Maharaj was telling Prabhupada that Gagamuni Maharaj, he'd been in Calcutta, then he went back to the West to raise money, and he bought some vans, and he had said that, you know, because he'd read in the Chaitanya Charitamrita about not eating food cooked by non-devotees and all the instructions there. So he had made a decision that when he came back to India, then he wasn't going to eat in any life members' houses. And Prabhupada said, yes, very good. And then he also said, and in fact, they're not even going to stay in their houses. They're going to camp by the riverside, and they'll cook their own food, and in that way. And then Prabhupada said, yes, very good. But he said, you know, just like in India, the system used to be, there were no hotels, but you could go and eat practically in any temple. Still, even now, there's some temples, just like there's a Lakshmi Narayan temple in downtown Calcutta. And you can go there at certain times of the day for 10 or 20 rupees. You can get as much as you can eat. So that system was there. So Prabhupada said, my father, when he was traveling, he would never eat in a hotel. But any local temple, they would come to the temple and immediately, you could get so many varieties. He said, for a few paisa, you could get as much for 6 people to eat. So he said, that's a good system. So he liked it that, Gagamuni was not going to eat at the life members' houses. At the same time, when we went to life members' houses with Prabhupada, then he immediately allowed them to cook for him. Because it's the etiquette, and if you refuse the prasadam, they become very offended.
Yeah, sometimes it becomes very awkward.
Yes, so they have to. So in those circumstances, you have to pray to Krishna, that's all. Don't overeat. But sometimes it's a requirement, just for the sake of the preaching. You have to be, sociable. And if you arrange it properly, you can instruct the life members before you go there. This is the diet. No onions, no garlic, no eggs, all these things. And also, you have to be meditating on Krishna whilst you're cooking. Yeah, and then we want to offer that prasadam. When we come, before anybody touches it, we want to be able to offer that to a picture of Krishna, or you can offer it to a picture of Krishna also. So if you do it in the right way, you can have them cook it and prepare it in the proper way also. It's just like when I'm going to see my mum in a couple of weeks, after this. So whenever I go there, she knows what my requirements are. So she goes out specially, she finds all different things that don't have any meat products. She gets vegetables, then she cooks it, prepares it nicely. And she's doing it because she knows that I'm a devotee. And we can't offer to Krishna anything, which is any meat products or whatever. So she's making an effort, to do that. So when I go there, then I don't mind accepting that, because I know that there's some consciousness there, that she's doing it for a spiritual purpose. And that, she's quite happy to sit at the dinner table and, I'll chant Sharirara Vijayal and, we'll offer it. And she's perfectly happy with that. So you can, if with a little forethought, you can make some arrangements to make it, nice. But still, anyway, you have to be a little careful what you accept from people. And even if it is vegetarian, it doesn't mean that it's, fit to eat. It depends on the people that you're dealing with. Yeah. But again, Prabhupada said, for preaching purposes, sometimes you have to do things that you wouldn't normally do. Yeah. And if you take that risk, Lord Chaitanya will compensate for that. Well, we won't read it tonight, but there was an incident when Hari Sauri was telling Srila Prabhupada about how difficult it was to get, foodstuffs in the Eastern Bloc countries. And so he's saying, it's really difficult, there's nothing there, just, a little bit of milk or this and that. And Prabhupada sat there, he said, you can eat meat. Hari Sauri is just like, he didn't know whether Prabhupada had actually said it or not. He didn't like to think that he'd actually said it. So he just kind of ignored it and he carried on talking. And then Prabhupada told him again, he said, if there's nothing else, he said, you can eat meat. And then he said, but Prabhupada, what about my consciousness? Prabhupada said, damn your consciousness, you have to preach. So, according to the time, place and circumstance. Okay, we're definitely going to finish. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you all for inviting me here. It's been a wonderful stay. And I actually can't believe that I've been here a week already. It's gone very quickly. So thank you very much, and I hope that we'll see you all in Mayapur. Yeah, good. Come to Mayapur, and maybe next year, if I'm on a European tour, then I'll come back again, if you'll have me. All right, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
And I actually sat down that night and I wrote a letter to my disciples. And it was a long letter, and I just, I said, well, we have to accept this is how life is, and we all prepare to die.
Anantamaravindadalaya taksya